the number one thing that we've come to is that same point that you made at the very beginning of this, which is around alignment and the importance of vision. Because what companies experience is the symptoms related. There's all these different ways in which product can go wrong, but when you peel back the onion enough, you start to say, wait, the core of this is these are all ways in which a void is getting filled. And that void is what it looks like when you're missing that product vision, when you're missing that alignment. Well, if I don't know where a product's going to be headed and I'm sitting in sales, well, I just want you to go do the thing that's going to help me close the next deal tomorrow, right? Like that's in front of my face. That's real. Like, let me go ask for that. And so they are going to bang their fist really hard on the table. But I've seen it go really well the other way, which is when you're not having to play defense the whole time as a product team or as a product leader. And you can play offense instead by setting that product vision, by setting that strategy, by getting people really excited and aligned around it. Now, suddenly you don't have the CEO saying, hey, I'm the guy in charge and I can, decide the direction of these things. Now, suddenly you don't have the stakeholders saying, I want to bang my fist on the table harder. They're like, get out of the way. Like, I like where product's going. I don't want you to get distracted to help me go win this one deal tomorrow because I'm more excited about the 50 deals that I'm going to be able to go win a year from now.
All right, Ben, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So I've been just waiting to talk to a master of product. And I know you're thinking like, oh, of course, right? But from my perspective, I believe out of the functional areas of the business, product, engineering, sales, marketing, I think the biggest issue and problems that I see in the market with product-based companies, tech companies for the last 25 years is this lack of understanding product, in product and outside of product. I think the teams lack a full understanding. I think the first venture-backed technology company I was in the mid-90s. So it's been nearly 30 years. All I've done is work with product tech companies. And it's evolved over 30 years, but I still think looking at the majority of the product-led companies, there's a big gap in product.
Yeah. It's so funny to hear you say it out loud that way, right? Because you're saying like in product companies, the biggest issue is product.
Right.
And I couldn't agree more.
I mean, the lack of understanding of like product cycles, product roadmap, product councils, is engineering leading, is sales leading, is marketing leading, like who's leading in these product companies, and you look at the size of the product teams. In most technology companies, the biggest teams are sales and engineering, right?
Yep.
Early stage, even in growth stage, and product and marketing are some of the smaller groups. HR, maybe some ops, right? Depends on the type of company, but oftentimes you'll have one product manager in there in a team of 100, or they're the product leader, but they're a product analyst, right? Like there's so many different challenges that I see within product in these companies. And so I'm excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah. Me too.
So for people that don't know who you are, you have had a history of successful product launches and experiences. I believe you were in early days doing product over at eBay.
Yeah, you got it.
I think that you're the most recently, before you're doing Prodify, your company now, you're over at Whoop as a chief product officer. From my understanding, you also have done dozens of product advisory roles across many companies. Let's, I'd love to start with how you define product.
Yeah, sure. So product is, in my view, the art and science of making sure that you have the right value proposition for your customers and that it's going to make sense for your business as well. And there's so much that's embedded in that, right? Like there's a lot, who are your customers and what's going to make it differentiated versus the other products that are out there, and How do you make sure that it's the right answer, not just today, but it's going to be for them tomorrow as well? If there is feedback that you have from the customers that you're trying to serve today, do you respond to that feedback, or do you take things instead in a direction that you think might be better because it is more indicative of the future direction or a new kind of customer that you're going after? So it's interesting that in this really small phrase, you can have so many sort of, complications packed in there of these issues that need to be sort of like solved. And I think that's where really good product leadership comes in. But it's also, why I think a lot of these product companies still struggle with product is because there's just so much work to be done to figure those things out to then result in the execution work that everybody else is doing. And sometimes that is overlooked, or it's just thought of as like, oh, we just need to ship faster and that's all that we need to do. And the reality is it doesn't matter how you're shipping things if you're shipping the wrong things.
Now, one of the things I see, in the structure of teams and interaction of teams is I kind of see product as a place of intake, right? Like your role is kind of that traditional business analyst, almost in a way of like when you used to think of like waterfall technology as going out there and eliciting requirements. But product is intaking from the market information and data. They're intaking from current customers, prospective customers. So they're interacting with sales and customer success. They're interacting with obviously engineering. They're developing the product roadmap and designing the product features. There's all this interaction, and it kind of feels like good product teams, and I would say product leadership over product management, is good at intaking, ingesting that, and then organizing it, and then again working with their teams again, like in a cadence to see, is this the right organization of the right things that we should be building?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sort of see the role of product, whether it's product management or product leadership, just some sort of combination of the two, is making sure that you're taking this capability you have of product development and directing it in the right path. So, in order to do that, you would probably fail if you weren't doing the intake work that you were talking about, right? If you're just sort of sitting in the four corners of your office and you're trying to kind of like, guess about where, the product needs to go, you're probably going to be very unsuccessful in doing that. So there's a lot of inputs that are required to make those decisions and to ensure that they're the right kinds of calls. You're constantly looking at how the things that you've been building so far have been performing to make adjustments along the way, right? So you're kind of constantly seeking and then digesting that information to sort of continue to evolve your perspective on the direction that things should be headed. And also you're working in a dynamic industry in the first place, right? Presumably the market is shifting. Your competitors are innovating out there as well. Your customers' expectations are changing around your product, either because of the product you've built or because of the products that they use that may even be completely outside of your space, right? So all of these kinds of things are having this impact that has to be constantly reconsidered, refactored into that next wave of innovation. And really that's kind of the role of product, is to be the innovators.
So in like an emerging technology company that has no roadmap, because they're doing something that's never been done before, right? And even in some of the growth stages, the product department and the product people are doing so many different things. There's so many different things you could be working on. Like it's I would say it's probably one of the departments that's probably, from my perspective, is hardest to really drill down on what are the most important things we should be focused on. So how would you break down in an emerging or early stage, series or a seed Series A company, what are the top 3 things a head of product should be focused on?
Well, at that earliest stage, I'm a big believer in that statement that until you get to product market fit, nothing matters other than product market fit. That's kind of always going to be the thing that's going to be pulling you in that direction, because that's really the role of product management up until the point that you get there, is to ensure that you're on a good path to get there. So what does that mean? Well, there's still a lot that's baked into that as well. So, when people talk about product market fit, depending on how you define it, I'll take you an extreme example. We're going to define the market as the one single customer that we're serving first. and then we can
Right.
go, build the perfect solution for them. And great, we've got product market fit, but it's for this like such an itty bitty market that it doesn't really like mean anything. So one of the things that needs to be defined is who is this target market that you're actually trying to serve? What does that ideal customer profile look like? What is the core value prop that they're looking for? How are their needs or their desires being underserved by the other options that are out there for them? And what's going to make yours better? How are they going to discover it? All those kinds of things need to be folded into this direction of how you're going to achieve product market fit. So I kind of see like the role as really being doing whatever it takes, whatever the missing ingredient is to trying to get there. And sometimes that's economics. That might be product pricing and packaging. Sometimes it might be distribution. Sometimes it might be some big missing feature that's killing you because you're losing in every single demo that you're running in a B2B sale. Depending on what you're finding to be the big kind of like pain point, that's where you focus next, and you keep kind of like hammering away at it until you really sort of unlock the right stuff. And I think what happens is when teams fail to get product market fit, even in environments where somebody else ultimately does, it means that it was achievable. They just didn't achieve it. And why did that not end up being the case? Usually it's because they have too myopic a focus, too narrow. They're thinking about just the features in the product. They're not thinking about the way that product gets distributed. They're not thinking about the way that product gets priced. They're not thinking about the partnerships that may be embedded in how they take it to market. They may not be thinking about the ways that the product can be demoed really easily, or how they could strip out capabilities from the product to make it simpler and easier for those new customers to digest. So there's a lot of different directions that you can go. You're right with product, and there's a lot of different kind of analyses that you need to run to get to the right answer, but it's all in the spirit at those earlier stages of getting to product market fit.
Yeah. Product market fit is very elusive for people. And I would say that it's an evolution. And I think that's why I think it makes sense to have a big picture of the market. I love companies that have the big picture of what they're going to build, but then they can get really granular on what they're going to build today to hit a subset of that market, because I think it's evolution. I think when people say I have product market fit, I like to think of at what stage, because it's really, and I see this, working with teams, is the problems that I see with the companies that I'm working at the seed A, B stage are similar problems I'm seeing at the C, D, E series stage. It's just more zeros, same problems, more zeros, right? And I would say even from a product market fit standpoint, an early stage company could feel like they have product market fit, but how big is that total addressable market, right? And what piece of that are they hitting? So a lot of times I like to think of product market fit as an evolution, and it's an expanding
I agree.
view.
It's people talk about it as being binary, and I'm not sure that it necessarily is, because the market itself is something that's kind of fuzzy, right? You can define a broader set of criteria that your potential customers could fall into. Or you could define a broader set of challenges that they're trying to face. Google is still today meeting needs of general consumers the same way that Google was when they started with just search. Now they're solving a lot more problems than with just search, right? And so you can broaden either the market and the type of customer you're going after, or you could broaden the number of solutions or the kinds of problems that you're trying to solve for those people. And the reality is you're never, it would be such a big mistake to wait until you completely nailed it before you start thinking about, well, where are we going to go from there, right? If you kind of think about these S curves of innovation, you're making progress on this S curve, and you get to that point of product market fit. Now you're in this growth stage, but that's the right moment to be starting to make these next bets so that you're ready and you're not going to be flat-footed by the time you actually achieve it, right? The same thing is going to be true with vision. The same thing is going to be true with strategy. The same thing is going to be true with product market fit definition as well.
Right. I am a big advocate on developing a vision and making it very clear and having everybody understand that vision. When we do 3-year vision with companies, we do vision in each of the functional areas of the business. So you tell me, like in product, what are the top 3 objectives that we want to hit? In sales, what are the top 3 objectives we want to hit 3 years out? And even though things will change, they'll probably change, it's important to align teams to that vision so we can work our way backwards to that 1-year plan, to those 90-day OKRs and KPIs. I think that's how you align a team. And without having a vision, you can't align, because you can't actually focus until you have alignment, right?
Yeah,
otherwise
that is actually the purpose of vision, is alignment, right? I think it's making sure that everybody's on the same page. I use this example all the time. I mean, if Tesla, its founding said, we're going to build a car that never has to go to a gas station. Okay, that's a vision. But there's a
Right.
lot of different interpretations of that. Does that mean you're building an electric car, a nuclear powered car, a car that has a gas station attached to it? Like what are
Right.
you doing here? And I think that if everybody in the engineering group was working in completely different, things because nobody was talking to each other, then it's not good enough. And I think that leads to kind of, a subsequent question of like, how detailed does a vision really need to be? And in my view, it needs to be detailed enough that there is no ambiguity around alignment, right? You don't want it to be so detailed that you take away the team's ability to innovate and to be creative in how they think about solving problems. But you also don't want it to be so under detailed that it's totally subjective and you actually haven't generated the alignment that you were kind of like seeking in the first place.
Yeah. That's why I like to separate the mission and the visions. I like to think of it as climbing up peaks of mountains, right? And so the mission is that North Star. As Simon Sinek would say, it's the cause, purpose, or belief, right? And it's mixed with a little bit of the how, which is how is always strategy. How are we actually going to do that? And then I love to bring back the vision to something tangible and think of like the 3 peaks out, right? That third peak out is what I would like to say is the 3-year vision. Each peak is a year. And so we can nail down the vision a little bit more if we think 3 years out. And then we can bring it even back to the 1-year plan. And that's the mountain sitting in front of us. And that's the peak. So we can define what that looks like. And it's interesting because using that analogy, thinking about some of the examples that you were just saying, is as we climb that mountain to that peak and to be successful, we have different viewpoints, right? We're collecting information and data. We're at a different elevation, seeing different things, right? And so that allows us to expand that product vision because we're sitting in a spot that nobody else is sitting in these companies with the work that we've done.
Yeah, and a spot you weren't sitting yourself a year ago, right? I think part of the reason that you make that progress is in part because you want to have the business outcomes that are derived from getting, that much closer to the promised land. But the other reason you want to do it is because you actually have visibility that you didn't necessarily have before, right? So, imagine a company that has a vision to establish some sort of AI-based solution for something down the line, and they haven't even, started with any of this right now. Well, the first thing they need to do is build some sort of training data set. Okay, well, you might have some concept for what you want it to look like, but you don't know what that training data is going to necessarily look like until you get there. And once you get there, now you have a view as to what fidelity of data you actually have, how many data points, et cetera. And now you have a sense of the kinds of things that you can build from it. And it may be amazing to find what technology has emerged since then, or what you can do with the data that you have that would have been very hard to predict before you really got to that stage.
Right. Product's a learning mechanism and a learning cadence, right? You would say that, we're taking inputs in, we're learning from the customers, we're trying things, we're seeing if that worked or not. What kind of different cadence do you see an early stage company trying to find product market fit look like versus like a later stage company that really understands their customer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the cadences, the endpoints of this whole stack of doing product work are actually not that dissimilar for what it's worth. I think it's best when you're delivering software to do it in small incremental chunks. Maybe it's 2 weeks at a time, 1 week at a time. Some companies are going to be doing continuous development, et cetera. So you should be doing things rapidly because you want to get that feedback in how things are actually working for your customers along the way, not doing these sort of like, big, huge rollouts where, by the time you've actually developed it, the needs of the market have completely changed underneath your feet. That's not going to be ideal. So no matter what stage company, there's a need to kind of like do things at a rapid cadence when it comes to execution. And I think that where some early stage companies make mistakes is they think that their vision shouldn't be as far reaching as you just talked about, 3 years out. They're like, hey, we're going to run out of money in 9 months. So who cares? Like, our vision should only be 9 months. And I call like BS on that. I think that's actually a wrong orientation, because if you look at it with such a short horizon, then it's going to lead you to make some suboptimal decisions for yourselves and some suboptimal decisions for your customers. And in fact, what's going to happen is you're going to have your customers outweighing the direction that you want to go to serve or to meet that product market fit. And what happens is you end up substituting what would have been exponential growth by achieving product market fit for linear growth, which looks better in the short term than exponential growth, right? But is clearly worse in the long term because you're not getting product market fit and instead you're getting customer solution fit.
Right.
And you have to have this longer term vision to counterbalance that. Now, where things are different, I think, is in the strategic space that's in the middle, the prioritization space that's kind of like in the middle, right? So you see either way, you have a 3-year vision, and either way, you're delivering software and let's say weekly releases. That's great. What a company that's past product market fit, or let's say they're Series D, growth stage company, et cetera, they can afford to make investments that they feel confident in for the sake of years to come.
Right.
Whereas a company that is going to run out of money in 9 months does need to think a little bit shorter term. And so maybe they shouldn't have that peak that's 2 years out. If they're only going to have 9 months of runway, they got to be thinking about how are we going to take off between now and then, right?
Sure.
And so that's where things get a little bit different, I think, is how frequent those peaks are that you're kind of like discussing, because you want to make sure that you're making strides towards taking in the reality, the constraints that you have in your business, and the realistic constraints affecting an early stage company are just going to be pulled forward relative to those constraints that are going to be there for those companies that, let's say, are already profitable.
I have teams that say, oh, we don't need to do the 3-year vision. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And this 9-month runway is most important. But I'll tell you, you don't have to spend a month on building your vision. You can spend a few hours. And the importance of that is your clients want to know where you're going. Are you leading your clients with the product, or are you just developing behind them, right? Like, I think your employees want to know where you're going, right? Why do they want to stay if they don't know where they're going? Prospective employees want to know this as well. And your investors, they're buying into something that's very long-term, very growth-oriented, and your prospective investors. So if you're worried about your runway, one of the most important things you can do is nail down your vision so you can get more investors, right?
Agreed.
And so I think all the stakeholders, you think about the current ones that you have and the prospective ones that you want, employees, prospective investors, prospective clients. I think you really need that vision to have that holistic picture. I think is really important for companies at the early stage and even at the growth stage. Now, again, I think at the growth stage, you have a better understanding of that. And I like what you were saying, like you can start to invest in some earlier bets that you might not be investing in when the money's a little bit tighter and you don't have as much bandwidth. Mm-hmm. But I do see even those later stage companies will make those bets and then maybe pull back, make the bets, pull back, tighten up, growth. So, but they have a little bit more leeway to do that than the early stage companies.
Well, I think that there's an independent decision that you can make. One of them is what direction are we headed long-term with our sort of innovative roadmap, et cetera, right? And then the other question that you can ask subsequently is how much of our eggs are we putting into that basket as opposed to the things that are sort of like near and right in front of us, So right. At the same time as you have some concept for where you want your product to be and what kind of new problems for new customers you want to be able to solve 3-5 years down the road, you also have feedback from existing customers on your product right now. I mean, some customer might be leaving you and saying, hey, we're leaving you because we don't have this capability within your product, and you have to make a decision about whether you want to build that or not. And you don't want to say yes to all those things all the time, because otherwise you become a professional services development shop, right, as opposed to a product company. But you also don't want to say no to all those things all the time, because in essence, you've basically just built 4 walls around yourself. And now you're sitting in this ivory tower trying to decide what's best for your customers without any real input and learning about the real market that's out there. So it's a balancing act, right? On the one hand, you got to make sure that you're being responsive and playing back to your customers what it is that they're willing to pay for, what the value proposition is going to be for your product. And at the same time, you don't want to sort of like let them take control and have the direction of your product be defined by your customers, because they don't care about your investors. They don't care about your 5-year vision, et cetera. But the reality is, and also because they're not necessarily going to be as good at it as you, right? There's a reason that they haven't built the product that they're buying from you now. And it's because they have limited ability to conceive of what that next best thing would be for them. And that's really the position that's in a lot of ways what they're paying you as a company to provide, especially in the world of SaaS software. Now,
you are an advisor of many product companies. What would you say is one of the biggest lessons learned in those experiences for you?
It's interesting because my background is kind of like a T, right? I've had a lot of operational roles where I've been, the head of product, chief product officer, et cetera, at a variety of different kinds of companies. And I've done that within consumer. I've worked in product in marketplaces. I've done it for B2B SaaS, enterprise software, you name it. And it's really interesting to see the connective tissue between those. But then I've also had this advisory role that I've had across a lot of companies as well. And collectively at Prodify, we're sort of a small group of advisors who have worked together now on about 200 different clients. And so, you really start to see some interesting patterns emerge. Now, we don't get those at the same depth as we would if we were in an operating role. But when you multiply the two, you see sort of like the breadth over here and you get the depth over here. You start to sort of like see the patterns and say, hey, I'm starting to understand what drives success, what drives failure in these cases. And I think that the number one thing that we've come to is that same point that you made at the very beginning of this, which is around alignment and the importance of vision. Because what companies experience is the symptoms related to not having done that well. We talk about that in the book we wrote called Build What Matters. And, we were like chapter 1 is the 10 dysfunctions of product teams. And, there's things like what we call the ivory tower, where you're not actually out there talking to customers, but there's also ones that are driven by stakeholders, banging their fist on the table, and whoever bangs their fist on the table loudest, that's the one who gets the thing, put into the roadmap next. But like, where's the customer? The customer isn't even at the table, right? And so, maybe you're taking things in a bad direction there, or you have the feature factory where you're just kind of like building a bunch of random stuff, hoping that it's going to sort of like change things. And the reality is you're actually focused in completely the wrong area. You're adding so much functionality and cruft to your product that now the next new customer can't even figure out how to use it because they're staring at this big blank page with all these functions and features and things. So there's all these different ways in which product can go wrong, but when you peel back the onion enough, you start to say, wait, the core of this is these are all ways in which a void is getting filled. And that void is what it looks like when you're missing that product vision, when you're missing that alignment. Well, if I don't know where a product's going to be headed and I'm sitting in sales, well, I just want you to go do the thing that's going to help me close the next deal tomorrow, right? Like that's in front of my face. That's real. Like, let me go ask for that. And so they are going to bang their fist really hard on the table. But I've seen it go really well the other way, which is when you're not having to play defense the whole time as a product team or as a product leader. And you can play offense instead by setting that product vision, by setting that strategy, by getting people really excited and aligned around it. Now, suddenly you don't have the CEO saying, hey, I'm the guy in charge and I can, decide the direction of these things. Now, suddenly you don't have the stakeholders saying, I want to bang my fist on the table harder. They're like, get out of the way. Like, I like where product's going. I don't want you to get distracted to help me go win this one deal tomorrow because I'm more excited about the 50 deals that I'm going to be able to go win a year from now. And
I think that's really interesting because I see that a lot. I spend the majority of my time in boardrooms, and I can't say this for every one of my companies because a lot of them I have a lot of really great companies that have really strong product leaders in them. But there are some companies that I see when I come in where product is just not prepared. Mm-hmm. It feels like they're behind the ball and they're trying to catch up. And, oftentimes it's because there's just not enough people in that area, right? And on that team, and they're doing a bunch of things. But, oftentimes I see and feel like they come in unprepared. They don't have a product roadmap. They have excuses why they don't have a product roadmap. They have excuses why they don't have a product vision. Some of them are really good excuses because I look around the table and I might see 6 people that think they own product, but none of them have that product name in their product role, right? So I think that's a challenge that I see a lot. But I love what you're saying is nail the vision, and then you can be on the offense on product.
Yeah.
Nailing that vision gives you the ability to be on the offense versus the defense. I really like the thought of that.
Yeah, you can kind of look at product in a couple different ways. One of them is, and I think the reason that product teams fall into this trap that you're describing a little bit is because they are a stopgap solution for just about everybody else, right? Hey, marketing, not hitting your numbers. Hey, there's this product thing that we could do that would enable you to hit your numbers. So now suddenly they're going to go asking for a bunch of things from product, right? Sales, hey, not hitting your numbers. Hey, well, what if we go build the thing that the customer's asking for right now? That'll help to boost the sort of like, close rate, right? And it's easy for everyone to kind of go to product as a way to help them hit their stuff. And I think a good CEO needs to kind of like step in and say, hey, wait, that's actually not the role of product, right? Like, while we could do that, that's actually a distraction from what I have this money going to product to actually do. Instead of building the next feature to close, to sort of artificially increase the close rate of the accounts given the product that we have today. What I want to do is I want to go build the better product down the road to make sure that our close rates are higher because we're just better product than the competition, as opposed to sort of using feature development as a crutch for something that's kind of like missing today, right? And you keep doing that over and over and over. And eventually what happens is product does fall behind the 8 ball because they're never going to have enough engineering capacity to support all the needs of the different kinds of businesses. And eventually you get this culture of them depending on product for hitting their numbers.
Right.
And now when it comes to the next year of setting goals and targets and things like that, and the CEO says, hey, marketing, can you hit this number? They say, yeah, I can. But in the back of their head, they're thinking, but I'm going to rely on product to go build a bunch of things for me to go make that happen. But then sales is doing the same thing, and ops is doing the same thing, and all these other kind of functions are doing it. And suddenly everyone's collectively spent more than 100% of engineering capacity in their heads to try to hit their numbers. And now what's left for actual innovation? Not only nothing, but like negative, right? Like there's not even enough there to even begin to think about it. And so that's why that roadmap never gets developed. Is like, why would I even bother creating one? But the problem is there's no way you're going to unravel the situation unless you actually start playing offense as a product leader. And that's something that took me probably 15 years to figure out as a product leader myself. But I've spent the last 10 years espousing as much as I can across companies that I've been working with.
Vision gives you the opportunity to play on the offense. I love that. I think that makes so much sense. And what you just described is something that I see all the time. You're right. Product is a stopgap, and then you burn out engineering. And companies only have so much time, capital, and energy. And that energy, if you waste that energy, people will look around and go, maybe it's time for me to do something else, And so I think you have to be really careful with that. All right. I do have one last question for you, and I love talking about this. And I could talk for hours about this, but I do have one last question. And this is probably one of the most important questions you'll ever be asked in your life. So I'm glad you're sitting down. That's important.
All right. I'm ready.
So imagine yourself on a desert island. You're stuck there for the rest of your life. You're never going to go back home. But luckily, you have a boombox with endless batteries. However, you can only bring one cassette tape to listen to on this island for the rest of your life. What album are you going to bring?
Well, you know what? I've been getting more and more into kind of like reggae and ska, and the desert island would work just fine for this anyway. So I think if you're going to live on the desert island for the rest of your life, then adopt the island lifestyle. And I've gotten into a band called Stick Figure that I love.
I love Stick Figure.
Very enjoyable for me. So puts me in the right mood. And honestly, you don't need to go back home to anywhere else. So
Stick Figure is awesome. I just came across those guys probably about 4 years ago. I had no idea that they existed. And they have awesome music. It's one of my favorite answers so far. I've asked this question a couple times.
Excellent. All right. Well, I like that. Now you're making me want to go off to a desert island and listen to Stick Figure.
Well, awesome. Well, Ben, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And definitely probably need to have you come back and talk again because like I said, I could talk product all day long. So
yeah, and I do talk product all day long. All right. Great to get connected and to do this. It was really a lot of fun to have the conversation. Thanks for the engaging questions.